Adding authentication in your application is usually a pretty intimidating thing. But with the Remix Auth package, it gets a lot easier. So in this video, we're going to add authentication to a New Year's resolution app using Remix, Xata, and Remix Auth. What's up, everyone? My name is James Q. Quick, and I do web development tutorials. Now, this is actually a part 2 series in building an authenticated New Year's resolution app with Remix and Xata. So in part 1, we talked about actions and loaders, and we set up CRUD operations with our data inside of Xata. Xata is actually the sponsor of this video. You'll get to see them hands-on in this video, but they are a serverless database that comes with a GUI. They have branching and migrations and all sorts of really cool stuff, including TypeScript generation for code. And we'll see all that in this video. Now, if you want to make sure you're caught up, make sure to go back and watch part 1 to get to this point. And then lastly, the number one resource you'll need is the actual source code. So Brad Garropy, a friend of mine, was amazing enough to create this demo. So you can find the source code in this GitHub link that you'll have in the description below. Inside of here, you'll have the finished source code under My Remix app under the Xata New Year's resolution folder. And then inside of here, you'll also have a README to follow along and kind of take the steps. So you can go back and watch part 1. You can follow the steps here and then be caught up for part 2. So we're just going to pick up where we left off and now start to add authentication in a Remix application using Remix Auth. All right, so just for reference, Remix Auth package is available on NPM. This is what we're going to use. And we're also going to use the Remix Auth form package, which creates an auth strategy using a form. So let's just see what we have in our existing application. So I'm going to go ahead and restart this application, and you'll see that we have the basic CRUD stuff going on. So inside of localhost 3000, I'm going to go to the resolutions page, and you can see I don't have any resolutions yet, but I can say I want to record video on Remix. I can add this. I can then go and check this off, which is great. And then inside of Xata, I can come into my JQQ resolutions database and see that I've got this data there. And if I were to come back and uncheck this, you'll see this gets reflected in Xata as well. So everything that we'll do inside of Xata is with the free tier. If you didn't follow part 1, you can go ahead and sign up for a free account with Xata, create your database, and you can mimic these 2 tables. Again, the details for those are in that GitHub repository. So we have our resolutions table, and this has a link to the users table. So what we want to do is assign a user to each one of these resolutions that we're going to create. All right, so we have the application running. We've seen what it looks like. Let's go and start to add the different packages that we'll need to add authentication into our application. So the first one, or the 2, are the ones we just talked about. So Remix Auth, and notice I'm getting some IntelliSense in here in my terminal. If you're interested in that, I think it's super cool. It is called Fig at Fig.io. Definitely worth checking out. Because now I can just kind of type in here. It'll give me IntelliSense for the package. So Remix Auth form is what we're looking for. So we're going to install both of those packages. And then we need to create a session.server file. So this is going to kind of define how our cookie sessions are going to work. And we want this to be a file that's only run on the server. So to do that, we can actually add in .server before the .ts in the file name, and that will ensure that this file is only run on the server. So this is actually going to go inside of our utils directory, and we'll call this session.server.ts. Again, we're using TypeScript in this. I didn't have to do anything specific to set this up. It's just one of the configurations that comes with Remix. Now, from here, we want to import the create cookie session storage here, and this is going to get imported from Remix run node. So now we can configure this. So we'll say session storage equals, we'll call that constructor, and we'll pass in a config object. There's lots of things we could do, but we want to clarify what the configuration is for our cookie. So we're storing the sessions for the user inside of a cookie. So we'll give a name to this, and this will be underscore session. You could call that whatever you want. We'll say same site is going to be lax. This will set the same attribute. I guess that just literally says what it does. So it's not super helpful, but we'll set this to lax. And just for reference, let's look at same site for cookie. Let's make sure that we can explain what this is. So same site on cookies allows you to declare if your cookie should be restricted to a first party or same site context. So by default, it's lax, and lax means that cookies are not sent on normal cross-site sub request. So that's what that means. All right, so we have same site is lax. We're gonna have path of just the slash. We'll have HTTP only. This means that this cookie is not available inside of the browser in JavaScript, so you can't access that through JavaScript. Then we're going to have a secret, and we're going to pull this in from process.env.session secret. Now, we already have a .env file. So if we look in here, we've already got our Xata API key that was generated for us in the last video with the Xata CLI, which is really nice. And now we want to add a session secret value. And this could really be anything. So you could kind of put whatever you want in here. We'll just need a secret that's used to encrypt the cookie. So then we'll also have secure, and secure is defining whether or not you're required to be on HTTPS for this cookie to be able to be transmitted. So we actually don't want this while we're doing testing. So we're going to do a neat trick, which is we're going to say that this is only available if, or only true if, the node env property is set to production. So after you deploy this thing, your node env will probably be set to production, or it should. And in that case, we will make sure that this is set to secure. But when we're in local dev, this will not be required to be secure. All right, so this is giving us a warning for saying that this thing could be undefined. We could also go in and add some additional checks for this. So if we didn't get session secret, we could throw a new error and say session secret is required. So we could throw an error there, and then this warning will go away because it will make sure that there is something there. All right, from here, we're going to export the session storage. So we now have configured with Remix how we're going to store cookies for a user, or store session in the cookies for a user. Now these cookies go back and forth from the front end to the back end, and that's how we track the user being logged in. All right, now we're going to create another file inside of here called auth.server.ts. Now inside of this file, we're going to define our form strategy, basically how to handle these form submissions for users, and specifically checking to see if the user is logged in. So we have a few things that we're going to import. We are going to import the authenticator from Remix, as well as the authorization error. So we're going to import those two things. Then we're going to import our session storage. This is the thing that we just created in the server session.server file. Next, we're going to import the form strategy, which is coming from Remix Auth Form. So we specifically installed that separate package to get access to the form strategy. And then we're going to import the get Xata client. This is coming from the Xata utils file. This is actually auto-generated for us. You can go and see this in part 1 of the video. It's just a command that generates code for your Xata client, including the TypeScript definitions for your tables. So you connect this application to your Xata database, run a command, and it generates this code. So that's where that's coming from. And then we want to reference in here the user record as well. And this is going to come from /Xata. Now, lastly, we're going to import a package that we haven't installed yet. So we need to do that, but it's bcrypt, and this is going to come from the bcrypt.js package. So let's go and install that. npm install bcrypt.js. I think I'm still getting a warning in here because I just installed this. It hasn't picked up that it's installed, but that thing should be installed for us. All right, so now we're going to create an instance of the authenticator, and we're going to do this with a new authenticator from Remix. And we're going to say this is going to refer back to the user's record. So this is basically just the type of user's data. So that's the type for that. And then we're going to use our session storage. So you can find tutorials on Remix to kind of walk through and set this up. But in this case, we are initializing the authenticator, telling it that the user record model looks like this, which is defined in that Xata file. It was generated for us. And then we're going to use our session storage to handle tracking of the authenticated user. So then we're going to create our form strategy, and we're going to create a new form strategy that we just imported. And inside of here, we take a function, and this function takes in a parameter that then has a property of form, so we can destructure that. And now we're going to work on this and basically decide whether or not the user is authenticated and return back the user. And this is based on the username and password. So first we need to get those two things. So we'll say email equals form.get, and then we'll get the email, and we'll say this is going to be a string, as a string. And then the same thing, but in this case, we're going to get the password. So again, this is getting back to kind of the basics of web development where you're actually submitting a form on the server. We're going to grab those two properties, email and password. Then now we need to actually query Xata to see if that user exists. So we're going to get the Xata client. And now with our database, we want to query. So we'll say await, and then we'll say Xata.db. Notice the IntelliSense in here for the different tables and stuff that I have. This is coming from that auto-generated code from Xata, which is really neat. From here, we want to filter. So we only want to get users where the email matches the one that is submitted with this form. And then we'll call get first. All right. And then from here, we'll just assign this to a variable called user. And now we have a decision point that basically says if there is no user, so if we didn't find a user with that email, then we can just do a basic log in here and say email doesn't exist or something. And then lastly, we will throw a new authorization error. So we'll just say unauthorized, this didn't work, throw an error, get out of here. Now, lastly, we want to check if the passwords match. And this is a good conversation point with security to let you know that passwords don't get stored in plain text. So if my password is I love cat videos, I'm not going to store that thing directly in the database because if it gets leaked, the password will be there. What I would store is a hashed and salted version of that. Now, I'm not going to go deep into the specifics of this, but basically this is a way to say like, if our database gets leaked and passwords get leaked, they're not getting the actual password. They're getting the hashed and salted version, which they're going to have a really difficult time reverse engineering. So because of this, to be able to check if our passwords match, we need to take that same action on this incoming password and then compare it against. So we're going to use bcrypt for this, and we're going to do a bcrypt compare. And we're going to say the password that the user entered, and then user.password as string. So this user.password is the password that's stored in the database. This password is the one that was inputted in the form. And then bcrypt is going to do the necessary comparison to compare those things to check whether or not those passwords match. If you have additional questions on authentication and things that maybe you'd like to see more clarification around, let me know that in the comments below, because I think that would be a great piece of comment or content, not comment. All right. So from here, we want to say if the passwords don't match, we're basically going to do the same thing. So we can just throw a new authorization error. So we'll just kind of copy that one down. And then at the end of this, if we found the user by their email, if the passwords match, then we're going to return the user. So based on a login form, what's going to happen when the user tries to log in? This is the form strategy that we just defined. And now we can tell the authenticator that we generated to use the form strategy and then tell it it's a type of form or give it a name of form. And then lastly, we will export the authenticator. All right, so that was kind of a lot, but when we're getting into authentication, it's a complicated topic. And I think this is as easy as it gets for a lot of different options. All right, so let's go ahead and save that and let's move on to our next step. All right, so the one thing we haven't done yet is actually handle sign up. So we're going to do a new route in here. So let's go into our app. Let's go into routes and let's do sign up.tsx. So we're going to create a brand new route, brand new component. And I'm just going to copy in the imports in here. so that we don't have to type them all out. So we're importing some similar things to what we just worked with. We're importing action function and loader args. Again, we referenced these in part 1. So if you missed those, go and check them out. Then we have form and link, which are two components that are from Remix. We have the authenticator that we just created and configured. We have bcrypt for hashing and salting passwords. And then we have our get Xata client function. So let's first start with our action function. So we'll say action. This is going to be a type of action function. Again, we did this in the first video. And this is going to be an async function where we can destructure the request. So this action is handling basically the form submission of a user trying to sign up. So in this case, we can grab the form, and we can grab this from request.form data. So we'll have to await that response to get the form. Then we'll grab the email. This is going to come from form.get email. You can see this is similar to what we were just working on with sign up. And then I will upload or update this for password as well. So just paste in a little bit of that snippet so we can get the email and password. Now, again, we're not going to go deep into this, but we will be doing salted and or hashed and salted passwords. So we can get a salt. Salt comes from bcrypt. So we can call bcrypt and we can call gen salt. And this is going to take in a number, which in this case is 10, is basically how many different times do we want to salt this thing. And I just realized we're missing one package for bcrypt to make this error go away. So it actually gives you the idea here that we're missing the types. So we can do an npm install, and then for types, we do @types, and then we type in the name that we're looking for. So in this case, bcrypt.js. Let's make sure that that is exactly what it said. So save, and we need to do this as a development dependency. So bcrypt.js, all right? And I think we can just put in a -d for development dependency. And hopefully that will have this go away. Nice, so that went away, and then we can restart our server. All right. So we're generating the salt in here. We tell it how many different rounds of salting we want. So this is the number of rounds to use. Again, we don't need to do a deep dive into this. Just understand that hashing and salting is the appropriate way to save passwords in a database, and especially not doing that without hashing and salting. So then we'll get the hashed password, and we're going to take bcrypt, and then we're going to call hash. We're going to call in the password, and then we're going to pass in the salt. So we're going to get our hashed password. This is going to take a basic password and convert it into something that you won't even recognize. And then we're going to get Xata from the get Xata client. So we'll get that thing. And then now we want to say that the user is going to be await Xata DB users. Again, the IntelliSense is really nice. We're going to create the user. Inside of here, we're going to pass in the email. Then we'll pass in the password, which is going to be the hashed password. We should rename this control or function function F2 is rename on Mac. So we can rename that to hash password so that it's correct. And we can do checks in here. We're not actually handling what happens if something goes wrong, if it fails validation on this. So we could add try catch to handle all those things. But in this case, we are going to return await, and then we'll say authenticator, authenticate. We'll do it with the name of form. We'll pass in the request, and then we'll say, where do we want to send the user to after they successfully sign up or fail? And in this case, it's actually the sign up process is done. What we're trying to do now is go ahead and log the user in. So the success redirect, we will redirect them basically to their dashboard page to resolutions. And then the failure redirect, we will just take them to the login page. So if for some reason they just signed up successfully, but the login failed with those same credentials, then we would go ahead and just send them back to the login page. And then in context here, we're going to pass in the form data. So form data is going to be the form. Now, I think this is like if we wanted to kind of repopulate the email, then we could go ahead and have that context be in that redirect so that we could reference it. So, All right, so this is our backend function for our login page. So let's go ahead and create our login page. So login page equals, and we'll start with an H1 that says login. And let's make sure we export the action, and then we'll export default of login page. All right, so if we navigate to, and actually this is not our login page, this is our sign up page. Sign up, and sign up. All right, so now if we were to go to our application and navigate to the sign up page, maybe we get an error or maybe we get content. Let's actually see. I did this mistake before. We actually need to return the JSX content. I don't know why I'm missing that so much. So there's our sign up page. We have the action defined, which is basically the form handler. Now I'm going to copy and paste in the code for the actual form, just because that is not necessarily the focus of this video. It's more on the authentication piece. So I'm going to copy this in and then we'll talk through what's here. So this is a form that will send a post request. This will send the post request and get handled by this action. If you remember on the resolutions page, we actually had several different types of actions that we could take. So we got a reference to the action property that was submitted with the form. And then based on that, whether we're completing a resolution, adding a resolution, or deleting one, we're taking a different action. In this case, we are there's just one action in here, and that is the sign up from this. So we have a little bit of styling in here, which is good. We have a link to the login page, which we haven't created yet. Notice it's using the remix link. That'll be a more intelligent, can do some prefetching and things like that. Then we have our email, basic input for email. Then we have password, basic input for password. Now, one additional thing we could do is also have a confirm password property. You'll see that a lot. And what you would do is you would check inside of this action function, you would get the password and the confirm. And if those two things don't match, you would then throw an error and send the user back to the sign up page. But in this case, we're not making that extra check. So then these things just get submitted with the button. Now this is going to automatically go and submit this to that function. So I'm going to create an email in here. I'm going to create a password of cool kids. I don't know why I'm so creative. That's what it is. But cool kids is what I typed in. And we can create sign up, and all things considered, hopefully we'll get to this page where we see all of our resolutions. Now you may notice one problem here where it's showing us all of the resolutions, even though this one is not associated with my user. So we'll come back and fix that in a second. But if we go inside of the users table, you should see now that we have our user, and then you see this long, ridiculous password, and that's because of the hashing and salting. So again, we don't store passwords in plain text. We make sure they're hashed and salted securely inside of our database. All right, so we have that working. The other thing that we can do is maybe come to the New Year's resolutions page and add in log out functionality. So inside of resolutions, we're going to need another action in here for log out. So inside of the checks in here for case delete, and then we'll have a case for log out. Again, another form submission on this page. Let's see, get rid of that. Then what do we want to do? We want to take our authenticator. We'll import this, and then we'll call log out. All right. And then this will, we'll pass in the request for this, and then we'll pass the redirect to say this should go to the login page. So at this point, after we have a few things configured, adding logout functionality like this is really, really simple, where we just call that logout function, pass in the request, and tell it where to redirect to. So the next thing we need is the actual log out button. And in this case, I think we already have a check for this. Actually, we haven't added this yet. So this is going to go inside of a conditional statement underneath the New Year's resolution link. So I'm going to paste this in and we'll talk about what we're doing here. So one, we are going to pass in the form that comes from Remix. And I'm not sure why this is not pulling up here. Is this form that one? I think that's the one we're looking for. So we want to import that. Now the thing we're doing here is conditionally rendering this logout button if we have a user. Let's actually get rid of that check for now. And let's just add this logout button. So this should show up, and then we'll show you in a second how to actually get a reference to the user. So we've gotten rid of the reference to the user. We now have logout. This should send us to the login page, which unfortunately we haven't implemented. So now let's go and actually create the login page. So I'm going to create login at TSX. I'm going to take the sign up page, and I'm just going to copy over everything here, and then we will call this. Let's actually make sure we rename this. So login page. All right, we'll have the form. We'll say welcome, log in please, or something like that. We can change this text to say need to create an account, and then we'll redirect this to the sign up page. All right, so there's that button. Our form should be the same. We'll have our form with email and password. So that's good. And now inside of our action, we're going to change this and actually handle the login process. So in this case, we're going to use our authenticator again. So authenticator authenticate. We'll say we want to use the strategy that has the name of form. We'll pass in the request. We'll then have our success redirect. We'll redirect to resolution. So after they log in successfully, what happens? If they fail, we will redirect them back to log in. So again, now this function just got a lot easier based on having that form strategy already defined. And that ought to work. So we should be able to log in. So let's refresh on this page. Let's log in with my email and then cool kids. Is that what we said? I can't even remember what it was. And we'll need to tweak the text of this button to log in. We'll do that in a second. And this should send us to the resolutions page and then navigate there correctly. So that's good. And then we'll update this text to be log in. Do you do log in with as 2 words or 1? I never know. I think technically the action here is to log in versus the noun is a login, maybe is the way I interpret it, but that's just me. All right. Now, one additional thing that we should do is we should not let the user go to the login page if they're already used in, because that just adds complication and confusion. And this is where we're going to add, we can get rid of a few of these imports, but this is where we're going to, actually, we'll need that one. We're going to add a loader in this case. And basically a loader is going to run some sort of logic before we get to the page that they're trying to get to. And what we want to do is prevent the user from getting there if they're already logged in. So we just redirect them away. So this is going to be a loader function. And inside of here, we'll have a parameter that we can destructure the request from the loader args. I feel like some of the syntax in here must be messed up. I think this one goes away. And this one goes away. All right, that looks better. So our loader function, what we want to do is basically try to get a reference to the existing user. So here we can use our authenticator again. We can call is authenticated. We can pass in the request, which will have the cookie that it can check. And then we'll have the success redirect. And this will successfully redirect to /resolutions. And we actually don't need to get a reference to the user here. We can just call this function. It will then redirect the user if they're already logged in. So if they logged in, if they are successful or are authenticated, successfully redirect them to resolutions. Let's just make sure that we export this loader in here. So now what should happen is if we try to navigate to the login page, we can now see that we get redirected to resolutions. Now we could create this as kind of a shared thing in Remix where we share this logic across different pages if we nested these routes under something like an admin or authentication or something. But in this case, we'll just copy over this code to the signup process. So inside of here, we'll add a loader. This loader, I think we have everything we need, and then we'll make sure that we export this loader as well. So actions are basically handling form submissions. Loaders are running code before you actually render a page. So if we try to go to sign up, it should redirect us back to resolutions as well. Now Now, remember, we don't have any protection around this resolutions page. So if I were to log out and then go to resolution, oh, it looks like, sorry about that. We actually have to return something inside of log in and sign up. So let's actually return that and return this. And let's see, does that work? Okay, so if we go to login page, now that works. But even though we're not logged in, we can go to the resolutions tab directly. And you see the logout button, which is confusing. I wonder if this may, I guess it didn't throw an error. It just kind of seemed like it worked, but the user was not logged in. So let's go back to resolutions. So what do we want to do here? We want to, on our resolutions page, have a loader. Let's actually just do something similar in here. In our resolutions page, let's create a loader. Well, we already have a loader, and then let's load the user there. So let's see, inside of our resolutions, we can copy over a bit of this. So we can say that we're going to get a reference to the user. That's going to come from there. And we're just going to throw this into the existing loader that we have. Again, we don't want to be on this page if we're not logged in. So what we can do is we can say failure redirect. If they're not logged in, send them to the login page. Super cool. So in here, if I try to go to resolutions, it will redirect me back to login page. So now we've protected each of these pages from a UI perspective to make sure that the user can only get to pages that they should be able to get to. All right, now the other thing we want to do is actually pass that user to the front end, and we can do that through our loader data, and then inside of our component, we can destructure the user here. So we could just log out like the user.email, for example, and this should get the email. So let's log in. Password is cool kids. I should have spelled it K-I-D-S or Z. I just did S, but cool kids would have been the right way to do it. So there's my username or my email. We're not really using that, so we can get rid of that. But just to show you that we have the user, whatever we wanted to do with the user at this point, we could. So we could display user information, we could display it next to the logout button, etc. Now, the other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that as we load data, so with in our loader, as we load this data, we only want to get data that's specific to this specific user. So if you remember, we have created one record in our resolutions table, which shows up here, but that wasn't created by this specific user. It wasn't associated with this user. So what we want to do is with our get many, we want to do a filter, and we want to filter based on the email of the logged in user, or actually the ID of the logged in user. So we're going to say we're going to filter by user ID, and then this is going to come from the logged in user ID. And that should work. Let's see if this does. So if we now come back, we should see no resolutions, which means now we need to handle the ability to create a resolution and associate it with a user. So creating a resolution is in the new resolutions tab. There is a form here that will submit, and this actually submits back to the action function up here. So for this, inside of this action function, we're going to want to get a reference to the actual logged in user. So just like we did before, to do this, we can use our authenticator. We can call is authenticated, get the user here, and now we want to associate this with the resolution that we end up creating. So we'll come down to add. This is where we're actually creating this resolution. And you see we pass in the year is completed and the resolution here. Now we want to additionally pass in the user. So this is the user that will have created this resolution. So now let's come in. Let's say record another remix video, because now we're on part 2. Let's add this and hopefully it will show up here. So this is good. Inside of our table, we should see now we have a resolution, and it also has the association with the user ID with this, or the user with this ID. You can actually expand and kind of see that record and see whatever you need. So now these records are associated with this specific user. To prove that this would work, maybe this would be a good exercise for you. Go through the sign up process, create another account. Under that account, create a separate resolution, then switch between accounts and make sure you only see the correct resolutions based on the logged in user. But I think we can probably assume that's actually a terrible philosophy. But I'm going to make the assumption that this is working appropriately and go and do some further testing yourself. All right, so that is authentication in Remix using Remix Auth and then Xata for our database. I think this was pretty fun, to be honest. Authentication is always a very daunting topic, but the Remix Auth package makes this a lot easier. Using Xata as a database has been one of my favorite databases to work with, so I highly recommend going and checking them out at Xata, and then following the tutorial to do this hands-on to get experience with both Remix, Remix Auth, and Xata. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm curious, what other topics would you want to see with Remix and or with Xata? I'm definitely going to be doing some more videos with Xata, so if you have any cool ideas for demos or something you would like to see, let me know in the comments below. But thanks for checking out the video, and I'll catch you in the next one.